Hey, there we are.
Hi,
Hi.
how are you?
Good. I'm so glad we finally made this happen.
Yeah, me too. So I could just jump around then with the roles in your career.
Sure.
So I guess the first thing was what led up to working with ADV in anime.
That is actually a really funny story. I was, I remember that it was a Saturday and my mom woke me up and she made me get up and get dressed and go to this wedding that I didn't want to go to. And it was like there was family friends and stuff like that. And at the wedding, there was a girl there who was a family friend, a woman who was a family friend, and she was dating John, who owned ADV. And I didn't know anything about that. And my dad was talking to him and like, what do you do? Blah, 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 I guess. And they mentioned, oh, something like, oh, my daughter's an actress or she wants to be an actress when she grows up or whatever. And I came over and I said, said something, and John, not knowing, said, "Oh, you have a great like animation voice." And at the same time, there was another guy at that wedding named Rob Mungle
Yeah.
who also knew people. Uh, he had gone to school with, he knew me somehow. I was like the kid sister of someone he knew. And he had actually already recommended me because he worked on a project that they didn't do Q to Q. I think that one of the first projects when they first started working, they actually had all the actors sitting around
Yeah.
and they had done like a table read. They never did that when I was working with them. I probably should. Well, we'll never know who it was, but there was someone that he was working with that he didn't like very much, who was playing like a young girl. And he's like, my friend's kid sister has like, she's an actress and she should do this instead. But they ended up casting that girl he didn't like. And so it was just this weird three-pronged John talking to my dad, me coming up and John recognizing I had a certain sort of voice, and then Rob coming over and being like, this is the kid I was telling you about. So it was this weird sort of thing. And so they brought me in for an audition and an audition and a callback, if I remember correctly. And I was in Samurai Showdown.
Yeah.
I played like Child C or something, I think it was called. And I don't even know if I had more than, I know I had one line at least, but I may have had a few, but one of them was talking about bees. And I had the line something like they're mean and scary. But I still was in Houston, Texas at the time. I live in New York now, but I was in Houston, Texas, and I had a pretty thick accent still. And I guess it came out like really exaggerated, like they're mean and scary or something like that. And they loved it and they kept it. But my boyfriend's little sister, who was like, I think 9 years old at the time, she gave me the hardest time for that. And that became like literally like a decade long thing where friends would come up to me and say, they're mean and scary. So that's how I got hooked up with ADV. And then the next thing they called me in for was, I think it was Burn Up, which was before Burn Up Warriors. And they called me in just to the callbacks. And then and then that's the only auditions I've ever had for voiceover. I've never had another audition since. It has always just been someone who knew or heard me called and cast me from just whatever I've done in the past. And I actually even tried to, when I first got out of drama school, I was meeting with agents, and my first agent, I was like, oh yeah, and so I have a bit of a voiceover career. If you'd like to, and he was like, you can just take care of that yourself. And even as late as 2019, I did a gig and it was a kind of big gig. So I thought, well, I should give my agent a cut of this, and there was some negotiation that needed to happen. So I called and said, will you negotiate this? And she's like, can you just do it? I don't need that. I don't need a cut of that. So it's been a kind of funny thing where like I don't audition and there aren't agents involved. It's just a kind of word of mouth thing. I mean, it's a pretty tight industry, I think.
Mm-hmm. Well, I know really early on too, Devil Hunter Yoko would have been at the same time.
Yes, yes, that was super fun. I think wasn't that the one where I played Azusa and Azusa 2.
Hmm.
So I that was fun because I got to be like the alter ego of myself, which is just I mean, I have just gotten to do so many crazy fun things. I mean, maybe every voiceover person has the same story. I mean, you interview a lot of us. Do we all just get to do these crazy great things? Because I just there's hardly ever something that's just been straightforward. It's almost always had like some kind of twist. Is that normal?
Yeah, I think, well, from what I've heard, depending on what time frame people started, like what decade it was, it's, yeah, there's usually all stories like that where they just fell into it.
But I mean, do they also get to, in terms of roles, do people often get to do kind of crazy roles, like getting to play one role and then getting to play the kind of clone
Oh,
of
yeah.
that role? Like that's a very fun activity, right? So for 5 episodes, I'm one person. And then the other episode, I get to be a slightly darker version of that. I mean, it's just such a fun thing.
Hmm. I would think that probably the darkest character you played was Asuka's mom in Evangelion, the movie.
Right. The first time around.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I don't get to play dark characters very often. I play a lot of bright people. Or really, obviously, when I was doing it at first, when I was really young, I played really young, like kids a lot. So um, it's a funny thing in anime. I people used to ask me my type, and I said apparently it's like ditzy math genius because I did a lot of like in Soul Bianca. It was
Yeah.
like the silly one who's the engineer of the spacecraft, or like in Gunsmith Cats, like the like 15-year-old explosives expert. And even in the burn ups, I was the kind of ditzy, like pink or blue haired, but kind of like tech savvy. So I do a lot of, and I think why I get cast like that is I sound, I think maybe a little ditzy, but I can wrap my mouth around challenging words, or like just complicated verbiage or like technical lingo. So that combination is perfect for that kind of archetype.
Hmm.
And it's fun. I mean, I like her, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Do you think that you probably have the most affinity with Minnie, or is it for somebody else?
Affinity? The most affinity. Who have I had the most affinity with? So Minnie May, I mean, I love her, but I don't actually play my own personality very much. And I would say like I'm nothing like her in real life. So if you mean affinity, like um I think the first Evangelion, when I played Hikari the first time around when she was a student, that's not me, but that kind of that's not completely who I was even then, but that kind of like good student, teacher's pet. Like I was like valedictorian and like on the student body, student body president, and like um, uh, academic bowl. So that whole Hikari kind of thing, that I think that was close to who I was then when I first played it. And then when I just played her again in the reboot,
Yeah.
which was so fun to get to do that. I mean, to get to grow up with a character, and she was like a new mom, and she was a much more mature, softer, caring, and dramatic character. And I usually play the kind of comic, like the comic relief, the comic lead, often to Amanda Wynn Lee, that kind of, she's like the tough girl, and I'm like the kind of comic sidekick. And so Hikari, on both ends, as both like a student and like a grown-up mom, and also she got some real, I mean, spoiler alert, like, she finds a suicide note, right? So there's just, I think that's probably closer to my personality. Like I'm in real life very nurturing and collect little sisters and that kind of thing. So I feel like Hikari felt kind of in the zone that way. It was a very easy process. Joe Freya is a genius director in so many ways, both the technical stuff. He's so good at that. He's so good, like, we have to rewrite things really quickly, but he also has this ease. Because, acting's a funny thing. It's like, it's when you first start, when you first pick up a script, it might be like messy or not really intelligible. You're not really telling the story. You're not really finding the jokes, and you're kind of getting better. And then all of a sudden you're really alive, and then it's perfect and it's stale and it's ruined. You have to stay like right before perfect. Like, it has to be clear, right? So you have to, but not perfect. Mm-hmm. And in voiceover, because voiceover is so technical and you can need so many takes, that it's hard to stay in that really alive realm. And for that project, Evangelion, it's something I had never done before. There were so many NDAs, like so many non-disclosure agreements. In fact, I didn't even know that I was going to do, like, before I could even talk to anyone, I got a call saying, someone wants to talk to you about a job, but you have to sign a non-disclosure before we can even have this phone conversation. She's like, we can't finish this phone conversation. She's like, can I get your email address? I'm going to email you. And so I just sign it before and along the way, I don't even know how many NDAs, like every step along the process, I had to sign an NDA. And I don't normally work unless I can read the script first.
Okay.
And I didn't do that when I first started, but now at this point in my career, no matter what I'm doing, I have to read the script first. And that's tough for some people, because they were like, there's so many non-disclosures. We cannot let this script out. I mean, that's the thing that's happening now a lot. I'm signing a lot of NDAs, and I think that that's great, because I think that means people care and they're curious, and they're big productions where there's so many people that have access to the information, and the people making it care, and they don't want spoilers out there for the people who really are tied to the narrative. So I think it's good for the industry that it's happened to be so tightly locked down, but it's bad for those of us who want to know what we need to do first. And they don't even let you have a script in the booth. That's how much the secrecy was. There were no scripts. So when you go in the day of, your lines get printed on the screen. Like you're with Paris, actually, because the people who are recording it were in Paris. So this is the first time you've seen it. You don't get your arc. You don't get to like work on it ahead of time at home. It's just right there. And Joe was so great at like giving me exactly what I needed. We did all of that in 1 to 2 takes, usually 1 take. And he'd be like, yep, we got it. And I'd be like, can I have a second one? And he was like, okay, well, what do you want to do with it? And I would say, I just want to try blah, blah, blah. And then sometimes he'd be like, oh, that's a good idea. Why don't you also do blah, blah. But sometimes we got a few safeties. So there'd be just for technical reasons. He'd be like, can we get a third for a safety? But most of them were 1 takes with a few 2 takes. And I think what that does for that performance is it just makes it so, I hope, alive. It felt alive and felt so fresh.
I know it's not totally the similar case, obviously, but Yomiko and Rear Die is more grounded too. Yes, that was so fun. That was a funny thing. I was in school, and Amanda Winley called me, and she was like, can you come to LA and do this? I think there's a lead in something that is perfect for you. You're not going to be the sidekick. You're going to be the lead. And I was like, I don't know when I can. And because she was like, we're going to need like 10 days. And I was like, if it was a weekend. And she was like, maybe we can do it on spring break. Like she really went out of her way. She's like, it has to be you. You have to do this. And I was so glad that I did it. I think I didn't miss a final, but if I remember correctly, like I was like taking a final and like jumping on a plane right after it. And then like it was like super squished, and it was a super dramatic trip. I think at the time I was I know at the time I was breaking up with a boyfriend. So it was like in the studio all day and then like conversations at night. And I got really bad allergies on that trip, which I had never had before. And so, you're in the voiceover room and you're trying to like not sound, to be graphic, snotty, which is like challenging. And that was just a great project. We worked with 2 different engineers on that project who were both just fantastic. And Amanda is such a great cheerleader. There were so many expletives said in the like outside the booth from her, because I don't know if anyone's ever told you this before, but you've pleased Amanda when there's some kind of cursing involved. Like, so you do a take, and then all of a sudden she's like, blankety blank blank. And you're like, okay, that one's in the can. And she's just really fun. And that one was also, I think, just cool, right? Like to have a superpower, because she could do things with paper. Mm-hmm. And then there was that fun element that she just, I don't know if this comes through when you watch it, but I remember Amanda talking to me a lot when she was directing it about how Yomiko just wants to buy rare books and to get out of debt to buy more rare books. She really doesn't want to solve any crimes. She really doesn't want to save the world. And so whenever you get to sort of play opposites, right? So she is saving the world, but there's this like, ambivalence is the wrong word, but there's this kind of reluctance, like, and it's not that she's being selfish or she doesn't care. The way Amanda always described it was she's just so focused. She's so in the zone, and she's not dumb. She's not oblivious. She's just like, okay, like, and back to the library and books. And that was really fun. And then all the history in that is super fun. It's just kind of a smart piece, And then it was really fun because that year I won Best Actress for the Dubby, they call it, I think.
Yeah.
Which was super fun because I didn't even know those existed before that.
Yeah, there's still a big fan following with that series as well.
Yeah, as there should be. I mean, it's just so smart. That's a very literate group. And I remember she like the fan base for that. And I do remember Amanda kept allowing me to make subtle choices, which I always love doing, but a lot of directors rightfully don't think it's appropriate for the kind of material. So I'm often kind of pushed to make some sort of bigger decisions. And in that one, she's like, you do you. And she's like, yeah, you go as small as you want. And she's like, because the demographic for this series is so just bright. They're just smart. And they're just, they pick up on the nuances, and there's a lot of subtlety involved. And so that was really fun to get to play, just the grace notes,
Mm-hmm.
Oh, this was fun too. During the fun and not fun, but a fun story. During the last, we recorded most of it up in the hills, like hills of Altadena. Okay. And then the last day we had a pickup session that we had to do down in Hollywood. And we would have waited, but I had to get back to school. So we had to finish. So it was like, well, let's just get this studio that we can be at, and we'll just finish the last few things. And we only had a couple things. And one of them was the scene of the hospital bed. Like, it's kind of a weepy scene, and it's dramatic, and it's very quiet, very, very quiet. And we didn't actually have long because I had a plane to catch. So I think we only had like an hour or something in the studio, because that was the only scene we had to do. We had to clean up a few things, and we just had to do that scene. Well, there was some kind of biker parade in town. So we were like just finishing like the first take of that scene, and I was like, like, and you can hear it even in the sound booth, which obviously has egg crates and all that stuff. And I mean, we kept trying to do it, and we kept, like, the engineer kept thinking, well, maybe I can pull it out, and we couldn't.
And it was just like, we're just like, how long is this parade gonna last? There's like bikes and bikes kept going and going. And it was one of those kind of things where it was like, okay, are you checked in? I had my luggage there, and it was like it just finished long enough to do like one take. And she's like, we got it. And it was like out the door to the airport.
Wow.
Timing, right? But I think that scene ended up being good because there was no time to be precious. I mean, that was a one take. That scene was one take, and it was one take with me, like in, sprinter stance, like with without this energy of like, I gotta go.
Hmm. Well, speaking of LA, was there any aspiration for you to move there?
No, well, I've done a lot of projects there. I've done theater there, and I've done films, and I've never done TV. I've only done TV in New York, but and I've done voiceover stuff there. And I got really close a couple times. Like, well, CAA, which is a giant agency, I've had a couple of meetings with them where they've said 2 meetings where they've said, if you move to LA, we will represent you. I was sort of like, well, can't I just do things on tape? And like, can't I and I was like, I promise I can be there in 24 hours. My family has a business, and they put a lot of things on a credit card. So my mom has like 50 million frequent flyer miles. I remember I told the agents that, I was like, look, I have access to 50 million frequent flyer miles. I can be in LA. I can promise you I can be within 24 hours. If it's a screen test, if it's a callback, if it's the job itself, I can be here within 24 hours. And obviously, if I were a huge fame or something, that, bi-coastal is easy. Yeah. But any kind of developmental talent, he's like, no, we need you in the room. We need you in the room. And so I thought about it, and it was like, I would move there for a job, but I'm not going to move there before. I've done enough shows there. This is going to sound crazy. I'm not one of those people that loves LA and doesn't like, loves New York and doesn't like LA. I love LA, actually, but I love New York. Like, I just love it. I love the walking culture. I love the theater culture. I love the restaurants and running into people on the street that and this is going to sound funny about Los Angeles. I have a blast in Los Angeles whenever I go. I have tons of friends there. They're always trying to get me to move. The thing about LA, that I probably should not say this on a podcast, but I'm going to say this. And the only person that's agreed with me is my mom. Actually, you are the only second person I've said this to, because everyone will think I'm a total brat. I was doing a play in LA, and my parents came to visit me and see the play. And they stayed for like a week, and we were hanging out, and I looked at my mom and I said, don't tell anybody this, but is too much sunshine overrated? And she's like, yes. And we were talking about how much we hate LA weather, and everyone says that's the reason to move there. But look, here's the problem with LA weather. You are never comfortable, because it is so hard to dress there. In New York, when it's cold, I bundle up. And when it's hot, I know I know how to dress there. But in LA, you're like, ooh, it's hot. I'm in the sun. Oh, I just walked through the shade for 5 seconds. I'm freezing. It's freezing outside, and they think we can eat outside, and this silly little heater is making any difference at all. Like, I'm just always cold in LA or hot. I never know what to wear. I'm always in like a jacket and sandals. And I'm a big, huge fashion person. Like, I love fashion. So it's like, I don't know how to dress there, and I can't deal with the climate control. And almost everyone would say that the weather is why they live there, but not me. But hey, someone wants to offer me a job, I'll be there. You want to make me a series regular? I'll come. I'll deal with it. I'll get a fashion consultant and figure out how to dress.
Are you this is probably obvious too then, but are you not in SAG?
No, I am. I'm
Okay.
SAG. Yeah. And that's why you don't see me crop up in more things, because there's obviously a very large non-union, and I've been SAG since I think I was 17.
Oh.
So
Because I know sometimes from some of the kind of boards, like fan boards and things, sometimes it'll be like, when I do something, it'll be like, oh, she came out of hiding. Or sometimes I see stuff that's like, where's she been? And mostly it's a union issue.
Okay.
Is that I only do union shows.
What is the story of how you got into SAG then?
So with names, if your name is taken, you have to change it a little bit, which is why so many people use their middle names. So when I went to join SAG, and it all had to be fast because there was this project coming up, my name was taken. And but it was someone using the name Kim Yates, but they said that was too close to Kimberly Yates. They wouldn't let those both happen. And so I went to the SAG office in Houston and to appeal it, and to ask why, because they weren't the same name. And he said, well, because he said the only way you could do it is if both of you sign a contract that said, or a legal document that says, if your residuals get mixed up, or if anything gets mixed up, that you won't sue SAG, you take responsibility for the loss. If one of you gets paid what the other one pays and the one cashes it, that's between you two, and we will not help. And I was, but they're also like, we won't tell you how to contact this girl. Like, I don't know who she is. And I found her on the internet, but I was like, just going to be this random girl asking. But my boyfriend at the time was in school with a girl who had done some little showcase. And for some reason, she had emailed me like an invite. And because you recognize your name, I clicked. I was like, oh, Amy knows this Kim. There was someone named Kim Yates in her play that she did. And so I texted her. I got in touch with her and I said, hey, I have, I'm trying to be SAG. I explained the whole situation. And it was so funny. She was, let me ask her. And this woman, Kim Yates, who I've never met, called me. We never spoke in person. She called and she left a message. Oh, because Amy had said that Yates was her married name and that she was divorced now. And so she had heard her talk about maybe she would revert to using her maiden name. But even if that wasn't the case, I don't think that's what ended up happening. But I just wrote her and I said, hey, I heard you might be letting Kim Yates go. If so, I'm Kimberly Yates, and I'd love if you let the SAG office know. And if also they said we could sign this piece of paper that said, and explain the whole situation. Well, this really sweet woman, and I was like, and Amy, gave the last name. Amy gave me, your number. And she was so sweet. She actually... and I was in Houston, she was in LA. She contacted the LA office. It must have been a problem for her because it was a problem for me. Because they're like, oh yeah, we said you could sign this thing, but now we have to get lawyers to draw it up and what's happening. And she went through all that rigmarole so that we could both have our names.
Wow.
Actors are cool people, man. People mock actors all the time and they think that we're high maintenance. And in my experience, I just find actors to be so helpful and fun. And and for a complete stranger, I was a complete stranger.
Yeah. That is really funny. I haven't heard that story yet with SAG questions. I know that was the same case with Amanda's husband though, Jason.
Oh, does someone have his name?
He went by Jackson Lee for a lot of his anime stuff, but then he can't go by Jason Lee because of the guy from Alvin and the Chipmunks and My Name is Earl. So
I think it's so funny that Amanda Wynn Lee, who's made her life in animation, right? Japanese animation. And that sounds almost like it could be Japanese. And she's the most Jewish white girl that she'll talk about all the time. It's just because her name was Wynn, and then she married Jason Lee. And so then she's like, hooray, I get to sound official.
Mm-hmm. So then, this is a more technical vocal question, but when you've done boy voices for voiceover stuff, what's your particular process for that?
I can't remember what's been my process for that. I will say this, when I first started doing it, I would come in, I would have an idea for a voice or a slightly different voice, and I would come in, and it was usually Matt who was like, yeah, no, your voice is cartoonish enough. You just stick with what you got. But I have gotten to do some I have gotten to do some voices. I think so. Even back in the day, now I ask for scripts, but back when I was working for AD Vision, we didn't get any scripts either. You came in and you went cue to cue, and Matt would be good, or whoever the director it was, he'd tell you about your arc, like what happens. And then when you were going cue to cue, if there were lots of scenes that you were skipping, and I was be like, hey, what's happening? What am I missing? And he would kind of summarize it so that you could have I like to have an emotional thread is very important for me, to make everything make sense. I don't want anything to be random. So I'm definitely the actress in the booth who's like, no, what happened? Like when they're like, no, don't worry, nothing happened. And I'm like, no, tell me what the story is. So, and now I've gotten pretty good at like, and they're pretty good at just like telling you quickly, but they often send you scripts now. But one day I walked in and it was Dragon Night and I was playing Luna. And Luna is a person. And then I was also playing Pink Dragon, who is a little pink dragon. And in the original Japanese, I'm not even sure if she made any noise at all, but she may have made a little bit of noise, like some noise, but I noticed like the first scene in, I was like, hey, Matt, she has mouth flaps, like Pink Dragon's like, and I was like, can we put some dialogue in there? And he's like, no, I mean, we can't just put a dialogue. And I was like, can I make up a dragon language? And he was like, yes. And I was like, can we go? So he let me like make up a dragon language. And now if you listen to it, it's not like I sat down and sort of created like this word means this and this word means that. It was mostly gibberish. But what it did mean is I just really wanted to have intention. And so like in my mind, Pink Dragon, like she was saying stuff and I knew what she was saying and I didn't expect anyone else to know what she was saying. But I think that, I mean, even to like get the emotion of what was saying, what I was saying, I didn't expect people to get that. But I'm really convinced that specificity in acting is like gold. Mm-hmm. And that if I have 100 thoughts running through my head about that one moment, they're not all going to read. You're not going to know that. But what you are going to feel is that it's full and that it's alive. And so I felt like with Pink Dragon, if you're just making random noises here and there, what's that? But if I give her a personality and in my mind, she's saying, no, let's not do that. Or yes, it's time or whatever I was saying in my head, even though I might be saying, I should put that, but like in my brain, I know what I mean by that. I feel like it gives the viewer a fuller experience, even if they're not aware of it, even if they don't even clock it, they don't even pay attention to Pink Dragon. It's just like, it's texture for the whole thing.
Mm-hmm. And do you, because I have found as well that people have different answers as to how they took to anime dubbing. Some people think it's really hard and some have said it was easy. Was it difficult for you to get used to, or do you remember?
Yeah, I think I was born being able to do it. Matt used to call me the one take wonder, okay, which is partially because of him. I don't know if anyone's ever told you this about Matt, but he's so funny. I think I learned you are either going to get it on the first take with him or it is going to take 35. I'm not even exaggerating. Yeah. Because if you nail it the first time, he's like, yep, that's it. But if not, you get him to start thinking. And then he's like, And then he does this thing, which I used to always make fun of him for. I love him to death. He's hilarious. But he does it like your voice, but it's not. And he gives you a line reading. But the line reading is if you did it, he wouldn't like it. Like it's nothing believable or real. It's also, so if he was mimicking me, he'd be like, let's use Mina Scary. He'd be like, okay, can you try it again? But can you try it like, they're mean, that's scary. Like he's doing like a fake falsetto and you're just like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do with that. And I don't know how I'm supposed to. And so you're trying to like guess what he means. So it was just easy to do it in one take. And for me, what I also like to do was, and Matt was so great about letting me do this, such a sweetheart. I like, again, to have a through line. So I like to do long takes, and often they'll just want you to do a few seconds at a time. So even very early, when I was too young and dumb to know protocol or who was the boss, I'd be like, can I just see that whole scene, especially with fight sequences, like running and jumping. And those are so hard for the engineers to slide around because you're often not having mouth flaps. You're sometimes on camera and you're sometimes not, but the script will have like a grunt, a yell, a jump, like all this Scooby-Dooies, as we call it, like all this stuff is happening. And they really want you to do those in like 2 to 3 second chunks. And I would ask, like, there was one time I remember, I can't remember what it was on, when Matt let me do 3.5 minutes. It was a very long thing. And I was like, I think I can do it. And I listened to it a couple times, and I think we did it twice. And the engineer was like, because I can slide stuff around. He's like, I can slide that around, because I just felt like I just felt like it was going to be more real. Because if you see me in the booth, I think I'm hilarious. Like, I am very physical. And so it'd be like, I'm like kind of, I don't really jump, but I'm like kind of doing aborted versions of the movements. And so often in those fight scenes, there's a build, right? Like there's an escalation. And so like, if you let me feel the build, then I think it's going to be more believable than just starting from square one. And Matt was really great about letting me do that. Amanda was always great about letting me do that. Joe let me do really long takes too, which I love. I love when directors let you do long takes.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I think there was always something about, well, you know what? It's funny. I wonder if voiceover has done this to me. When I do live action, when it's me too, a lot of times at some point, either in the dressing room or sometimes at home if it's something on film, but in theater, it's usually in the dressing room, I'll do the whole show to the mirror because I've gotten so used to acting to the animation right there. And I feel like when I don't have that in front of me, I can be a little too under, like a little flat, because I think I'm more animated. Like, I think my face is more animated than I am, or I think I'm expressing more than I am. It's just very internal. And all I need is the mirror to kind of just tweak it just a tiny bit. And most acting teachers will say, never look in the mirror. Like, that's a technique that's quite frowned on. And I think the reason why it works for me is because it's like I don't judge myself doing it, and I don't stop and start, like I stay in the moment. But I don't think I'd be able to do that if I hadn't started with voiceovers. Like, it just trained me to be able to see a face and a body doing it. And then my emotional life, my intentions, my voice are matching that picture. Mm-hmm. So to answer your question, was it easy or hard? I don't even think I don't want to insult it by using the word easy. I think it was just natural for me. And even when I was doing Evangelion with the technology where it's like the ticker tape at the bottom, even that ended up being, because I was like, how am I going to split my vision? How am I going to look at the words and then also watch what she's doing? But I read music. And so that kind of helps you do that. And I just find it, it's just fun. It's like, so I'm not saying it's easy, like maybe it's challenging, but it's like doing a great puzzle or playing an amazing video game, right? Like, it's like video games aren't always easy, but it doesn't mean they're difficult. They're like, it's a good kind of like, yeah. Like, the thing is about, I feel this about video games and acting, is the clock just goes like this. Right? Like, you're in the booth and you just taxes, laundry, phone calls you have to return, everything goes away. Everything trite and banal about life goes away, and you just get to be in that zone.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that you, I know I guess most of the anime that you've worked on has been more dramatic. Do you have a preference for dramatic over comedy?
You mean just for voiceover or for everything?
Just in general, for acting.
So I should say that when I was 3 years old, I told my mom I was going to pretend for a living. So I think I've kind of always been an actress. And so when I was doing stuff in like elementary, I mean, literally like elementary and junior high and that kind of thing, even into high school, I would say that I was I mean, is this also how school theater is, right? Like the person who's going to be the actress ends up playing the big parts, and the big parts end up being the more dramatic roles. But I remember actually even telling my drama teacher how much more interested I was in making people like feel like that was the thing. And then I went to college, and this is a funny story that has also never been told on camera. But I feel like the parties that be won't be hurt by this. So I kind of wish this would have happened before I decided which school to go to. Like when I first auditioned, when I first was going there, I wish they would have told me this because it would have changed my mind. But the first project we had in like Acting 101 for majors, it was Spoon River Anthology, which a lot of people use. We each had to do, that's like it's a play it's an old play that's a set of monologues, and often they'll use those in acting classes. They'll give you like 2 or 3 different characters, and it's all characters in a graveyard. So it's kind of Our Town-esque. Okay. So it's people speaking from the dead, right? And so we all had 2 characters, and then they invited a panel of the theater teachers to kind of, just give us some sort of welcome to school. And this was all in the first couple of weeks. Welcome to school, and here's your first project, and here's some feedback. And so the very first, so I did it, and the dean of the whole theater program was like, I want to talk about Kimberly first. And it would be embarrassing to say what he said. Like, he clearly thought I was a really talented actress. And he said all these really glowing things. And then he said, quote, "Too bad no self-respecting director will subject an audience to listening to that voice for 2 hours." And then we had they took me into the office and I had meetings, and they said, "We think you need to change to playwriting. We think you're a good writer, because your voice, you're never going to be an actress." And I was like, "Well, I do voiceovers." And they're like, "Well, those are cartoons. That's not serious acting." And it was really a struggle. And they wouldn't cast me in things unless I didn't get cast in anything unless a guest director was there. And even when a guest director came, like, I'd hear through the grapevine, like they would try to talk them out of casting me, which was crazy because they liked me. They actually voted me outstanding graduate when we graduated. I was like the outstanding graduate of the theater department because I kind of made myself available in lots of other ways. And I was a team player, and I think I created a lot of great projects, and I directed a lot. But what I did realize that the one way I could get cast was to be funny. I was dating a guy at the time who was like, "You know what? Maybe you should switch from drama. Maybe you should try." He's like, "You're really funny, like in real life, and you have good timing, and you're crisp, because it's all about like being able to land the jokes." And he's like, "I just think that might be your gold." And so what I did get cast in was guest directors, was all the stuff that was hard to cast, all the really tough comedic roles. And so it ended up being kind of a weird blessing. I went out of school, and then I had a career full of being the funny girl. And then in 2014, I started coming back to that. It's just funny how life works, the melding of the two. So I have all this comedic background, but I also have this very earnest and I guess strong personality in some ways. And now for the past 8 years, I've been getting to do that. But with all that comedy in my background, to find the points to make it funny. Mm-hmm. And there's something like, I think a spoonful of sugar helps the medicine go down. I did a play in Los Angeles in 2015, I believe it was. And there was a really rough scene where my character, it was a married couple, and we had gotten sober together, and I'd gotten I'd gone missing for a few days, and I was really super drunk. And it's a scene in a hotel where my husband comes and finds me, and I'm so out of it
I've clearly slept with a man who's not here, but I'm not trying to hide it. Like, I'm so out of it. I'm not even thinking it's like infidelity. Like, this is how gone I am. And there was so many parts of that. Like, it was such a dramatic role. Actually, you know what? It was 2014, now that I remember, because it was right when I started my career started shifting a little bit. And I remember I was having a tough time with that particular scene. And the director, Sal, pulled me actually out of the theater, like out of the rehearsal space at one point by myself. And he was giving me some notes, and he was talking to me about anger and like clicking into the anger. And then he was also like, well, this is actually what's funny. He was like, let it come from you. Just like, let it come from you. And I'm a person of faith. And so I prayed, and I was like, okay, God, this is not in my easy wheelhouse, but can you just, like, for the sake of the show and for the other people involved you're depending on me, like, help me find something. And so we were doing a run of the scene, and I was wearing the other man's shirt, just a big shirt. And they had tossed around what should have been my clothes. So there was like my clothes scattered around. And my husband character kept threatening to leave. And there was lots of tears at this point, and it was fighting and like very physical. And he turned his back at one point, and it looked like he was going to come back. But he turned his head, like he wasn't looking at me. And I grabbed the bra, and I like threw it under the bed. And it was really funny because it was just like this, like you're trying to hide it now. Like, it's so ridiculous. Like, but in the rehearsal room, it got a huge laugh. And so afterwards, Sal Romeo, the director, when it was over, he's like, that's the key. Don't squash your funny. Like, let her be there. Let her live hand in hand with the drama. So long answer to your question is, started dramatic, ended up being forced into doing comedy just so I could get cast in school, ended up really loving comedy and becoming a student of, I had an improv team for a few years. We had a regular show at the Pit, and I work with a lot of comedians, and I work with, actually, so I do acting coaching. So I work with a lot of the writing staff of late night staffs like Seth Meyers and Jimmy Fallon and all that kind of Saturday Night Live. Those are often writers or comedians who want to learn how to act. And I just kind of got into that loop. And so, like, we talk a lot about the structure of comedy and how it works, how it works in a script versus how it works in a joke. And I love the science of comedy, and I think it's super important. But I also think it's good for, but I think it's best for a spoonful of sugar helps medicine go down. I'm a big fan of comedy. So it's a long answer to your question. I guess I do it all, but I like it best when it's together. I will also say this, and this is not from an acting point of view, but just from a life point of view. There would be so many times. I remember one time I was in some building, and a friend, a non-actor, ran into me. She's like, in the elevator, and she's like, oh, I heard your voice down the hall. And I was like, oh, that voice I love. And I've had so many non-entertainment people comment on my voice. And the same with whoever's out there. Like, whatever it is about you that might feel not quite cookie cutter, there are people that love that.
Mm-hmm. So is there any other voice work that you do now, or was the Evangelion redub the last thing?
I've done 3 other things since then, as you actually know, because we were having trouble scheduling this because it was really busy. And unfortunately, I have NDAs on all of them, so I can't talk about them at all. But I'm excited, and I'll talk about them when they come out again. And I'm excited to be in the booth again instead of bringing the booth home, which there was a lot of that during, shutdown. And so now being in an actual booth, I love. I know a lot of people do stuff from home, and of course it's great that we can have home studios, but I just love standing up in that thing and having an engineer with you and the big old thing, and just the glass. And
mm-hmm.
And the room, you know what I mean? Like at home, it feels like it's much tighter.
Yeah. Well, so then my final question is always asking, what do you want your legacy to be?
Oh, wow. This is going to sound weird, or I think this might sound not sincere, and it is absolutely totally sincere. I feel like when you're really giving a great performance, people are not thinking about the performance at all. They aren't thinking about you. They're thinking about the story.
Mm-hmm.
If you're giving a really good performance, they get lost in the story. But if it's a great performance inside of a great story, I feel like they're not thinking about the story, they're thinking about themselves, their own life. And because, you know, we are all the protagonists of our own life. And so I've always felt like what I want people to go out of the theater thinking is, I'll use this example. I saw To Kill a Mockingbird on Broadway in standing room seats, like when it first came out. And I was there with a friend. We were standing room only. Usually when you do standing room, you can sit down because people, like corporations, buy big blocks of seats and no one sits down. I mean, not all the seats are filled, but I mean, To Kill a Mockingbird was like, for weeks, every single seat was filled. Like it was just such a hot ticket. It was so great. And Aaron Sorkin's adaptation of the book and the original film were so timely and so amazing. When it was over, I turned to my friend Michaela and I said, a good story on its feet. So a play, animation, film, any of that can do in 2 hours what a teacher, a therapist, a preacher, a politician take 10 years to do. And it doesn't mean that those other jobs aren't important. Like we need the policymakers and we need the therapists, we need the teachers, like they do different kind of things. But just as far as changing you or like making you realize something really deep, because in that play, Atticus is a just man who's trying to be fair to everyone, even the bullies. And what he kind of learns is that because he wants to respect everyone, but how can you respect someone who's disrespecting someone you love? You know, like where does justice work in there? And it's such a difficult sentiment to really internalize. And like, I watched that play and I was like, oh, I get it now. I get justice. Now I get it. And so I guess I want my legacy to be in projects or a podcast or, you know, walking down the road, but mostly like in projects that make people have epiphanies, you know, that, and my little piece of the pie as a performer is to babysit my performance so that they don't walk away and go, oh my God, she's such a great actress. They go away and think, wow, justice is important.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because that story was so alive. So that's what I think.
Okay. Well, thanks. I'm glad that we finally got to do this.
Yes, I'm so glad too. Thank you for being, just keeping trying.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chris.
Yeah. I'm actually, a couple weeks ago, I did interview Rob Mungall and I'm going to see him at a convention in 2 weeks here. So I'll have to tell him that we did this.
Yeah. What did he have to say?
Oh, he was really funny, but, just you know, talking about how wild the early days of ADV were and stuff like that.
Yeah, he's a fun guy. I think when I was home for Christmas, I didn't get to see him, but he had texted me and he was actually making barbecue at a restaurant. Like, and he was like, come have some of my barbecue. And I wish I could have. Yeah, I mean, I don't even know what this life is that Rob can just like end up cooking at a restaurant one night. I didn't know there was such thing as guest comedians who cook meat.
Mm-hmm. I'll be sure to send it to you once I have it up as well.
Oh, please do.
Okay. Well, thanks.
So much, Chris. Bye. Have a great night. Bye.